Hello, good evening. It is your host, Emmanuel Isaiah Smith, and today's date is Saturday, January the 31st, 2026. The time is 6:33 p.m., and I am in Miami, Florida. The topic of today's lecture is Project MKULTRA comparison to gang stalking. And I'll let you know, ladies and gentlemen, that I tend to do these lectures outdoors, and I may have to raise or project my voice from time to time in order to drown out the background noise. Please adjust your volume accordingly, and thanks for tuning in. As I often like to say, ladies and gentlemen, throughout the course of human events, throughout this world in which we live, from time to time, governments have done things that they're not proud of. Sometimes they do things that are outright atrocious. Why? Well, that remains one of the great mysteries of humanity, but one might assume that when you get into government, particularly the national security or intelligence areas of government, and you begin to witness the worst in human behavior, particularly because you are on the law enforcement side of things, your view of humanity and what makes a person worthwhile and what makes a person useless becomes magnified. Even government staffers across the spectrum of various jobs that you can get in government tend to see the worst in human behavior regularly, because people who exhibit qualities that may constitute the worst in human behavior, they're usually observed, documented, and remedied by government sources. Take a police officer, for example. Let's say a police officer takes his oath of service at the age of 25 and he retires at the age of 60. By the time that officer is retired, particularly depending on what part of the country he lives in, he's probably seen a lot of bad behavior. The core mechanism of police work is to dissuade people from giving in to their urge to misbehave. Because sometimes misbehavior can be dangerous. It can be dangerous for you. It can be dangerous for other people. But depending on what part of the country that officer did police work in, and depending on the crime rate and the type of crime that he observes over the course of his career, a police officer over a 30-year career can typically say, I've seen the worst in human behavior. I've seen just about every bad thing that a human being is capable of. The same can be said for FBI agents or CIA agents or federal law enforcers and state law enforcers. You know, it's their job to curb human misbehavior. It's their job to watch for human misbehavior. And when people misbehave to the point where it becomes hazardous to themselves or others, then the police are called. Police are constantly responding to reports of human misbehavior. So over time, a police officer, a CIA agent, an FBI agent, a federal or state law enforcer, or even a law enforcer whose job it is to analyze law enforcement work or do law enforcement training videos, or come up with strategic ways for law enforcers to curb crime. Okay, even these types of people, even forensic specialists and lab technicians and crime scene analysts, okay? The kinds of people, the kinds of law enforcement workers who don't necessarily interact with the criminals and the victims, they get to see quite a bit of human misbehavior as well. So do EMS workers, ambulance workers, people in hospitals, people that work in hospitals. They see a lot of the worst in human misbehavior as well, because there are a lot of assaults and horrible violent crimes that happen in the United States daily that require the attention of police officers, FBI agents, ambulance drivers, hospital workers, forensic specialists, crime scene investigators. All of these law enforcement workers and these state employees on a daily basis are constantly analyzing evidence and seeing the result of human misbehavior, human aggression, human corruption. So when you observe these employees, right? These kinds of employees that are constantly observing human misbehavior over the course of years, eventually they become cynical, they become skeptical. Some even lose their faith in humanity, but stay in the job because they're good at it at this point. They're knowledgeable in it at this point. It's a good career for them. And it allows them to live their life in a way that suits them. Now, when you look at programs like the one we're going to talk about today, ladies and gentlemen, Project MKULTRA, this is a CIA program, okay? It was obviously devised by people in the American intelligence community that had seen a lot of human misbehavior in their particular, in the course of the trajectory of their careers. They see a lot of it. And I think at some point they might have sat back and scratched their heads and said, you know what are these creatures? Right? What are these creatures? And this is minus a degree in psychology, right? Because that's what psychologists do. They're analysts of human behavior. Okay? They have taken a course of study that have led them to be stewards of the practice of knowing what a human being is going to do next, or what human tendencies are, or what the human thought process is. Okay, clinical psychologists oftentimes work very closely with law enforcers and those in the law enforcement profession, because psychologists and clinical psychologists, psychiatrists and clinical psychiatrists, and those in the business of knowing the human mind can offer law enforcers valuable insights on why people do the things they do, particularly when it comes to criminal mischief or heinous crimes, etc., etc. Understanding the human mind is the key to understanding why some people are able to carry on in society successfully and some people are not. You see? So minus a degree in psychology or clinical psychology, or a degree in the psychiatric disciplines, okay? Someone who constantly observes human misbehavior might at some point scratch their head and say, what kind of creatures are we? Okay? The philosopher Plato described human beings about 350 years before the birth of Christ. He described human beings as upright walking bipeds with flat nails. Okay? A very generalized approach to what a human being is. And the philosopher Plato was right. That's all you can really say that a human being is ultimately. Because a human being only really knows their own thoughts and their own consciousness and their own reality. Okay? Now, with the advent of clinical psychology and psychoanalysis and the advent of the anthropological disciplines, okay, and various social experiments concerning interconnectedness with people, now we have more of an idea of what it means to have a common consciousness, or the consciousness of a society, or the consciousness of a country, or even a global consciousness, you see. And people look at one another with more familiarity now than ever. But ultimately, the orchestrators of Project MKUltra had some questions about just what is a human being and what are the variables that make human beings do what they do. So the CIA decided to put together a clandestine program they called it MKUltra, and it was designed to put human beings, persons, people, all right, living Homo sapiens, in a variety of social situations, some of which were infused with the ingestion of chemical substances, just to see how people would react, just to see how the subjects would react, and just to see how the people around the subjects would react. What is human behavior? What is the human mind? What makes people tick? What motivates people throughout the trajectory of their life? Okay? A professional psychologist might assert, well, what motivates a person is different depending on the stage of their life that they're in. Okay? What motivates a toddler to get up every day is going to be different than what motivates a 10-year-old to get up every day. What motivates that 10-year-old to get up every day is going to be different from what motivates a 15-year-old to get up every day. What motivates a 15-year-old to get up every day, and when I say get up every day, I'm talking about get up out of bed and go about their business however they choose. All right? What motivates a 15-year-old is going to be different than what motivates a 21-year-old. And what motivates a 21-year-old is going to be different from what motivates a 41-year-old. What motivates a 41-year-old is going to be different from what motivates a 61-year-old. And what motivates a 61-year-old is going to be different than what motivates an 81-year-old. You see, it all depends on what stage of your life you're in. That's where your ambitions and your motivations come from. But in the most extreme, oftentimes sadistic circumstances, what motivates a person? Okay? And Project MKUltra was aimed at using covert mechanisms, oftentimes controversial mechanisms, to find out that very question. What motivates people in various professions? And how do different people react to different situations at different times, you see? And ladies and gentlemen, we're going to look at this lecture in the similar fashion that we looked at my COINTELPRO lecture, my Schutzstaffel lecture, the NKVD lecture, the OVRA lecture, and a number of the lectures on Cuba's role in international terrorism. We're going to read from pre-selected documents that I have selected, and I am going to pull various talking points from these documents, and we are going to compare the trajectory of these conversations to the trajectory on conversations that I brought to you about gang stalking, with the first comparison being when I say that Project MKUltra was aimed at understanding human behavior in various situations, sometimes derived situations. That's a lot of what clandestine gang stalking is supposed to be. It's supposed to be the study of human behavior, namely the human behavior of targeted individuals in various situations. you see. Oftentimes at the expense of the targeted individual, and sometimes at the expense of the gang stalkers, undercover operatives, and liaisons that approach or come in contact with the targeted individual. It's an observation of all of their behaviors. What is a targeted individual's behavior going to be when confronted with synchronized disruption all the time? What's the attitude of the disruptors going to be when they see that their actions are disrupting another person? You see, will the targeted individual find a way to overcome the menace? Will the stalkers themselves abandon their duties as gang stalkers? Or will they continue on despite the trouble it causes? You see, there are so many questions to be asked about this human behavior experiment called clandestine gang stalking, and what data is being collected on targeted individuals and gang stalkers alike by our national security and intelligence apparatus here in the United States, ladies and gentlemen. So I have a number of documents here. I have about 30 printed documents. We're going to go through each one. These are all about the CIA's MKULTRA program. We're going to look at it in depth, and we are going to pull talking points and comparisons to clandestine gang stalking from these documents. So we'll start with the first one. It it's kind of looking like this might drizzle or rain, so I may move my position right quick so as to not get wet. So before starting this lecture, I'm going to move to an area that I'm less likely to get rained upon. So you're going to hear a bit of silence over the next few seconds, ladies and gentlemen. But I will very likely remain outdoors. I like to do my lectures outdoors, ladies and gentlemen, because I like the spaced out atmosphere, the spaced out environment. There's more room for me to get up and move about if I decide to get up and pace as I'm delivering the lecture. Furthermore, there's less of a feeling of being contained or crowded when I do the lectures outdoors. And there's less of a focus on me from bystanders when I do lectures outdoors. It's mostly people going about their business. Although I do get the occasional person or group of people that stop and listen to what I'm saying. That doesn't bother me. I've done lectures outdoors, recorded lectures outdoors in front of hundreds of people before, and many of which were intently listening to what I'm saying. I've done lectures outside of the downtown government center at various points in times throughout the day, mostly on Sundays, in front of hundreds of people. I've done lectures inside the mall, at the food court, in front of hundreds of people. I don't mind doing lectures in front of people. It's just, you pick your spot. Sometimes I feel like doing them in the presence of lots of people, and sometimes I feel like doing them in relative solitude. And today is one of those days where I prefer solitude, so I'm going to do it outside in a fairly spaced out area and trying not to get rained on. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to begin. All right, this first document is from a Radio TV Reports Incorporated document. It looks like for a local affiliate station of NBC, the television network. It's the WRC TV network for NBC Nightly News. And this particular document was produced September 15th, 1984 in Washington, D.C. And the subject was mind experiments. And the interview is, it looks like an interview between lots of people concerning the CIA's MKULTRA program, which it ran in various points in time in the 60s and 70s. It was quite controversial when people found out about it. So starting off, this is going to be a conversation between a news correspondent named John Hart and a number of other interviewees that have insights on this program called MKUltra. So John Hart is the interviewer, and he goes on to say NBC News has new information on mind experiments done 20 years ago without the patient's knowledge, experiments funded by the CIA. This information indicates that the CIA was interested in learning how to erase people's memories. This report is by Paul Altermeyer. There are a number of anonymous interviewees here. The unidentified woman says that it cost her her life. The unidentified man said that it was like they had complete control over him, talking about the experimenters. There is a person named Val Orcolo who says that they heard that it was the most brutal program in the United States at the time. There is a person named Altmeyer who is a part of this interview. He's saying that they're former patients, part of the CIA-funded experiments called MKUltra, which were performed at a Gothic estate known as Ravenscrag in Montreal, Canada. This work was done by the late Dr. Eugene Cameron and involved extensive use of potentially dangerous drugs, excessive electric shock treatment, and endless tape-recorded messages to sleeping patients. Some heard the same message 250,000 times. Newly released documents show the CIA's former chief psychologist, John Gittinger, monitored Cameron's project for the agency, meaning the Central Intelligence Agency. In an exclusive interview with NBC News, Gittinger describes Cameron's methods. John Gittinger continues. His idea then was to put this bit of the interview that was taped in a round band that played circling inside of a football helmet. I think that it would say over and over again the actual words that a person had said. And Dr. Cameron's idea apparently was that if someone listened to this long enough, it would represent some kind of a breakdown in a psychotherapeutic sense. So, I mean, they were basically at this stage of the experiment. And mind you, Project MKUltra is federally documented. This program actually existed. This program actually carried on and was paid for by the taxpayer. This project actually happened. These are not word of mouth or hearsay accusations. These are real people who were real test subjects for a CIA program concerning the human mind and the capacity of technology to erase memories. You see, this thing they did with the football helmet, they played some sort of a tape circled around a football helmet, and apparently somebody was supposed to be on the receiving end of this tape. This I'm not sure if they're saying, there's not much of a visual here, but perhaps a tape was placed inside of a football helmet and a person was supposed to put the football helmet on, and somehow the tape was supposed to be played inside the football helmet over this person's head over and over again until all a person could psychologically envision was the words of this tape that's being played inside this football helmet. I mean, that's what it sounds like. I mean, it's a bizarre visual, but that's what it sounds like to me anyway. But what this program is, this part of MKUltra, and mind you, there are many different aspects of MKUltra. This particular aspect of MKUltra was designed at finding ways to erase people's memories, which, I mean, ultimately, that could be a good or a bad thing. I mean, I think every person that's ever been born in this world, at some point in their life, thought to themselves, you know what, I wish I could just forget that scenario, or I wish I could just forget that situation, or I just wish that I could forget that sight or that visual, or I just wish I could forget that experience that I had at that point in my life. I wish I could just erase that from my mind, right? Because sometimes people's thoughts are disturbing, and sometimes memories are disturbing. This part of the program was aimed at trying to find ways to erase memories, which, again, if a person wants part of their memories erased for this reason or that, maybe the memories are painful, you know what? That's their choice. A person can opt to offer themselves to an experiment and say, you know what, there are some memories that I have that I would like erased. I think my life would be better without these memories or those memories. Yeah, I'll be a part of your experiment. Maybe you can find a way to erase the memories that I wish could be erased. So I'm not going to sit here and say that simply the idea of erasing people's memories is a bad thing. It could be a good thing. I mean, think of a child abuse survivor. One of the things that makes child abuse so heinous is that this child has these horrific memories of being abused, typically by an adult, their whole life. They have to go their whole life with those memories. What if you could erase those horrible memories from the mind of a child who was abused, a teenager who was abused, or even a person who is a grown adult that may have encountered abusive behavior by others that they wish that they could forget or get out of their mind? At that point, erasing those memories using technology would be a public service and a public good. But if you're just taking human guinea pigs, I guess, and subjecting them to potentially harmful technologies without telling them the consequences, well, then you get stuff like what we're reading here. You get these interviewees that are talking about how this program almost destroyed their life and destroyed their mental capacity and things like that. So if you're going to conduct in-depth psychological experiments like this, you have to do it with a sense of responsibility and transparency for the patient so that they know what they're getting themselves into. Um, all right, so it's saying that there's a Dr. Sidney Gottlieb, who was the CIA's chief chemist in charge of Project MKUltra. And what he's saying in a recent deposition, is he's saying that the CIA was interested in retrograde amnesia, which is blanking out a period of time in the person's memory, and a follow-up study of some kind of patient that showed they've suffered amnesia from anywhere from 6 months to 10 years. So it's a way of inducing amnesia, which is memory loss of some kind, and that can be done with the use of drugs. It can be done with the use of electromagnetic technology. It can be done with the use of invasive surgeries. Amnesia can be induced, and if it's done in a responsible way according to the will of the patient, then that, in my mind, is an acceptable use of these sort of what you might refer to as psychotronic technologies. So all right. So there is also a lawyer being interviewed here. His name is Joseph Rao. He was the lawyer for a number of the patients in these experiments. And he's saying that these people were treated as guinea pigs, thinking they were getting real psychiatric care. So what that says to me, ladies and gentlemen, that the people that were used in these experiments, and I'm gonna get up and leave real quick, ladies and gentlemen. I had a gang stalker walk up and try to disrupt the lecture. I'm gonna go ahead and walk off. He looks like an undercover operative or some gang stalker that has some sort of connection to federal, state, or local law enforcement. Now he's walking really fast, but he just walked up and tried to disrupt the lecture, and I'm looking to get past him because I don't want to see him, I don't want to smell him, and I don't want to be bothered by him or anyone like him. And my apologies for having to disrupt the narrative or the conversation. These undercover operatives, I've done video after video about them. They conduct themselves like total animals. They're extremely hostile and annoying, and they're disruptive. And I just had one walk up and attempt to disrupt the lecture, and I'm getting out of the way. So you'll have to excuse the disruption. They usually disrupt me in spaces like I was just in. And it looks like the rain or whatever that drizzle was has gone away, so I can go back outdoors comfortably again. I was just sitting on the patio of a Hilton hotel, waiting out the drizzle, and some stalker, he looked and moved like an undercover, just walked up and crowded my space really close. And then he tried to walk off as I was walking off to make it look as if I was chasing him down the street. That's another thing these undercovers like to do, is when they approach a target who looks uncomfortable, if the target tries to walk away from them, they'll oftentimes walk in the same general vicinity as the target is walking away, to make it look as if the target is trying to crowd the undercover space or get in the undercover's face or threaten or physically intimidate the undercover. You see, so that's something that undercovers like to do. They like to play the victim. They like to create false narratives and false scenarios making it look as if they're not the aggressor, but the targeted person is the aggressor, and they're the ones just doing their job, observing, etc., etc. So, you know, as I was doing my lecture, he walked up and just started crowding me, and he had on a hoodie and one of those COVID face masks, so I couldn't see his face. And as I started gathering my items, my tablet, my bottle of water, and my book bag to get up and leave the patio, he got up and started kind of crossing paths with me as I was leaving, so that surrounding gang stalkers and surrounding other undercover operatives who were looking at us or observing us would be able to jot down in their notes, looks like Smith was trying to intimidate one of our undercovers. You see, they're constantly doing that. They're constantly pestering targeted persons. And then when the targeted person gets up to leave, they leave at the exact same time as the targeted person to try and make it look as if the targeted person is trying to chase them or attack them or get in their way, when all I'm trying to do is get away from that animal. The kind of person who would use his capacity as a ward of the state to pester a sovereign United States citizen and then try to make it look like the citizen was pestering him. Okay, that kind of schmuck. Okay, so yeah, ladies and gentlemen, that really just happened live, all right, at this Hilton hotel that I was sitting in front of to avoid the rain. So if you give me 1 second, ladies and gentlemen, we'll get back into the main talking points of the lecture here. And the reason I call these guys, these undercovers and these stalkers and these liaisons and all these people that keep walking up to me and troubling me out of nowhere, animals and scumbags and schmucks and just the lowest adjectives I can find, is because they're not just observing. Okay, I've said time and again, ladies and gentlemen, that I don't mind being observed by my government. Okay? But if you're sending people like that, real idiots, to observe me within 5 or 10 feet like that, knowing that they're the kind of person that will probably try to start some sort of a fracas or problem, what kind of a government would do that to a sovereign United States citizen at all? That's why I'm so critical of the U.S. federal government right now, because it doesn't curb stuff like that. Who needs that? Who wants that? You see? And a targeted individual knows when it's unnatural. Okay, a targeted individual knows when it's derived or staged, because we experience it every single day for years upon years upon years on end. So you know when it's a stalker, and that's what that guy was. First he walked back and forth in front of the parking lot observing me, then he got up real close and then left when I left. It was just bizarre. And they do that on the buses with me as well. These undercovers, they get on the bus and they try to sit as close to me as possible, even when there's lots of seats available. And then if I get annoyed and hit the string to get off the bus, they get off at the exact same stop with me and crowd me some more. You see, just trying to get some sort of an instigation started or some kind of an altercation started so that the police would have to be called and I or he would get into some trouble or some sort of a fracas. That's their goal, is just to disrupt, cause harm, and pester and annoy. It really is shameful. But we're going to get back to the talking point, ladies and gentlemen, and trust me, this is not the first time I've had lectures disrupted and I've had to talk to the listening audience about what just happened. But we're going to continue on. These stalkers have been exposed, and we're going to continue exposing them, ladies and gentlemen. This person, Orkolov, who was one of the patients in this experiment, he's saying it was an awful feeling to realize when I found this out that the man whom I thought cared about what happened to me didn't give a damn. I was a fly, just a fly. That's what this particular patient felt after the experiment was completed. You see, These people weren't told in this study that was being done. This is a CIA study. We are inducing amnesia. We are studying human behavior and the human brain. And we are in the process of manipulating your brain waves, etc., etc. They weren't told this, you see. They found this out afterwards. And some of these experiments resulted in brain damage for the people that were the subjects. And they were just very angry. They were angry at their government. And they were angry at the people around them. They were just angry and they were very bitter. The conclusion to this matter, it states, is that the United States and the CIA were doing what the Nuremberg laws, those were the laws that were brought about by the end of Nazi Germany, say you can't do. You can't take experiments on human beings when they're not told that these experiments are happening. They thought they were getting psychiatric treatment, and they were paying for psychiatric treatment. And Altmaier asked, do you see ethical problems on the part of the agency or yourself in doing the funding for this? Because Dr. Cameron was working on winning people and they were winning foreigners, you see. So it's saying later that the CIA had no comment on this article, but it's interesting that the CIA was conducting experiments on people that were contradictory to the Nuremberg laws that were brought about by the end of Nazi Germany. You see, because in the concentration camps in Nazi Germany, Hitler's Gestapo had officers that were in charge of those concentration camps that were conducting psychological and physical experiments on Jewish and other minorities, you see. And when the Nuremberg trials happened and a lot of those officers were hanged for crimes against humanity, some international laws were passed concerning who can be experimented on and when. And some of those laws said if you're going to experiment on human beings, you have to tell them they're being experimented on. Otherwise, you're liable for any damage that happens to that person. So we're going to continue on. All right, this is an interesting one. There was a church founder named George Peters. This is another article from 1982, November. He was the founder of the Church of Naturalism. He was murdered at his Hollywood Hills compound as he was working on a documentary about MKULTRA. And it's just suspicious. We don't know what this church pastor was into or what his disposition was towards the United States or this program, and we don't know what else he was into. In the 1970s and 80s, there were a lot of cult pastors that were starting these churches that were these big cults, and a lot of these churches were found to have been plotting terrorism, acts of terrorism, and some of these church pastors, these cult church pastors, were abusing women and children. But we don't know that about this guy. All we know is that he started a church called the Church of Naturalism. And he was going to do a documentary about MKUltra, and he was found slain on his property before he could get the documentary filmed, and it's difficult to know who it was that committed the murder. It was just a real tragic event. And he was found slain with 3 other people. They'd been beaten and shot, and the police had made no arrests in the murders because they didn't know who killed them. They were killed by assassins from somewhere, and it's suspicious because, you know, this guy hadn't been reported in the news as dangerous. For example, like David Koresh, the founder of the Branch Davidians Church, who in 1993 was slain by the Texas Guard because he was stockpiling weapons, saying that he was the reincarnation of Jesus Christ. And he apparently had several women that he was carousing with, etc., etc., and he was exploiting people. You know, this guy was under the FBI's radar for a long time in the 1980s and 90s. But this guy we don't know so much about outside of these documents, saying that he was simply working on some sort of a documentary on MKUltra and was slain. That's bizarre. And this particular church pastor, George Peters, was going to focus on MKUltra's LSD experiments, in which people were given the drug LSD without their knowledge, just so the operatives that were around could see what effect the drug could have on him. Or have on them, rather. It was a human experimentation module that the CIA was running about the effects of LSD on people when they weren't expecting to have ingested LSD. So we're going to go on to the next article. This is a Radio TV Reports Incorporated article. Radio TV Reports Incorporated, 4701 Willard Avenue, Chevy Chase, Maryland, 20815, and there's a phone number of 301-656-4068. This document is for the public relations staff of a CBS local affiliate, WDVM TV, for the CBS Evening News. The date on this document is April 16th, 1985, 7 p.m., Washington, D.C., and it's the subject is a ruling on CIA projects, and the host of this particular program was Dan Rather, who is considered one of the most noted TV presenters in American history. He states a wide-reaching Supreme Court ruling today giving the Central Intelligence Agency wide powers to decide what secrets it wants to keep from the American public in general. And in today's case in particular, the justices... Hello, good morning. It is your host, Emmanuel Isaiah Smith. And today's date is Sunday, February 1st, 2026. The time is 11:50 a.m. and I am in Miami, Florida. This is the second part of the Project MKUltra lecture. The first part got cut short because I had a unexpected low battery last night as I was recording. So we are in the next day and we are going to continue on with the MKUltra narrative with respect to its similarities to the operations, functions, and auspices of clandestine gang stalking. We're going to I want to make a reiteration from last night. There was a document that I read that I want to go over a second time before we move on to the next part. If I could just find that really quickly. This is the Radio TV Reports Incorporated document. This is a document that is federally kept, as are all the documents in this lecture. This one was a communication between CBS Evening News and the local affiliate CBS network station WDVM-TV out of Washington, D.C. The date on it is April 16th, 1985, 7 p.m., ruling on CIA projects. I read this document last night as I was communicating part one of this lecture, but I want to go over it once again because there was one valuable part of this paragraph that I think I didn't elaborate on. So this is Dan Rather, the CBS interview host, or CBS nightly news host. A wide-ranging Supreme Court ruling today giving the Central Intelligence Agency wide powers to decide what secrets it wants to keep from the American public in general. And in today's case in particular, the justices ruled that the CIA may refuse to say who was involved in Project MKULTRA. That was a top-secret program in the 1950s and 60s that reportedly included giving LSD and other mind-altering drugs to unwitting Americans. And it says here that at least 2 people died from these experiments. I'd like to elaborate a bit more on the deceased persons from these experiments before we move on to the next document, which is to be examined and analyzed by yours truly. So this mind control experiment, this human behavior experiment, this state-sanctioned human behavior modification protocol called Project MKUltra resulted in the demise of at least 2 persons who obviously didn't know as the experiment was happening that them dying was a possibility. So this is interesting because it shows that at least in this experiment, ladies and gentlemen, there was a possibility of great bodily injury or even death to the participants, and the experiment continued anyhow. Now, does that make the federal establishment of the United States in this time period corresponding to we'll say the 1950s and 60s, let's say for all intents and purposes 1950 to 1969, that 19-year period, does that make the U.S. federal establishment guilty of state-sanctioned murder for having run these illegal experimentation programs on unwitting citizens, causing their death? Now, the official time frame for Project MKUltra was 1953 to 1973, so that's a 20-year period of running these human behavior experiments on people. And it says in this CBS Evening News report that 2 people perished as a result of these experiments. Now, these 2 people are the tip of the iceberg, ladies and gentlemen. I can guarantee you right now, as I sit here this day, that in 20 years of running illegal mind control experiments on people, many more, dozens more, maybe even hundreds more people passed away as a result of these experiments. The two people that the evening news anchor Dan Rather is referring to are the two people that his affiliate news station were made aware of. You have mind control experiments that involve giving mind-bending drugs and other substances to unwitting participants, not only in social settings but in hospital situations as well. That these persons were exposed to chemicals, drugs, and other substances against their will that caused their deaths is very telling. Is it state-sanctioned murder, ladies and gentlemen? Are these people being seen as human guinea pigs that have no... They're totally expendable, is what I'm saying. These people were approached as expendable test subjects by the CIA, okay? Yes, there was always the possibility that people could die from this experiment, but the CIA continued it anyway. These test subjects were seen as expendable, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, that is highly reminiscent of clandestine gang stalking, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, derived car accidents, derived sickness and disease, derived hostile interactions with stalkers, dangerous police encounters where police officers are giving false reports about a targeted individual that could result in that targeted individual being destroyed. Okay, as a part of my gang stalking campaign, one thing that I was experiencing quite a bit when I first came to South Florida, ladies and gentlemen, was false police reports being made against me in very ritzy, very trendy suburban districts in South Florida, which could have resulted in a deadly police encounter. So, for example, one day I was walking through Sunny Isles Beach. This had to have been sometime in April, probably April of 2019. I was walking through Sunny Isles Beach, Florida, doing a gang stalking in action video, and somebody filed a false police report against me, saying that I went into a local grocery store and I started waving a gun around and pointing a gun at people. Okay, that was a total lie. I hadn't even gone to a grocery store at any point in time during that entire grocery store visit. As a matter of fact, the opposite. I was outside the entire time I was in Sunny Isles Beach. I was taking pictures of the high-rise condominiums. I was taking pictures of the architecture. I was taking pictures of the locals. I was taking pictures at the beach. I was taking pictures of Sunny Isles Beach. It's a beautiful city, and I wanted to take pictures and walk around as any tourist would. And as I was walking around taking pictures, and mind you, I hadn't gone into any grocery stores or any establishments at all there. But as I was taking pictures, the Sunny Isles Beach police pulled up to me, and 8 police officers with AR-15 assault rifles jumped out of their cars and approached me. And I said, "What seems to be the problem, officers?" And they said, "We got a call from someone saying that you were in a local Publix store with Publix is the grocery chain of South Florida. And they said that someone called and said you had come into one of the Publix grocery stores with a gun, a semi-automatic pistol, and you were waving the gun around and pointing it at people. And I said, well, I can assure you, officers, I have not gone into any establishments at all since coming to Sunny Isles Beach. I've been outside the entire time taking pictures of the scenery. And they asked me to sit down on the sidewalk, and they got my ID, ran my information, asked me a few questions, and then they left. Well, not necessarily that, just getting up and leaving, but they essentially cleared me of what I was accused of, and then they left, which was it was a harrowing ordeal for me as a United States citizen to have experienced such a thing in such a beautiful part of the country as Sunny Isles Beach, Florida. And I'm gonna get up and walk a little bit. I got stalkers all around, undercovers, you name it. They're swarming me. I'm here in Dadeland Mall, which is just east of Kendall, Florida. And excuse me, I chose the mall for today's lecture because it's 30 degrees outside here in Miami. It's not typical. 30-degree weather is not typical in Miami. But today I have 30-degree weather to contend with. And I figured if I went to a local mall, I'd be able to do the lecture more comfortably. But as I've always said, ladies and gentlemen, stalkers never sleep. Undercover operatives never sleep. Liaisons never sleep. They are constantly looking for targets to pester, and once they get the signal, then they spring into action like a pack of wild zoo animals. So I just experienced a little synchronized space crowding just now, so I'm getting up and moving my location. But as I find somewhere else to sit, I would like to make a reiteration, ladies and gentlemen, that targeted individuals, much like the targeted test subjects in Project MKULTRA, are expendable. I'm seen as expendable. I'm looked at as expendable by my target, by my stalkers, by my undercovers, by the liaisons, and that expendability is what motivates them. They know that if something were to happen to me causing a fatality because of their actions, none of them would do a day in jail for aggravated murder, first-degree murder, second-degree murder, third-degree murder, manslaughter, or anything, okay? If anything were to happen to me because of their actions, no one takes the fall for it. It's just like Joseph Stalin's NKVD. They were personally responsible for the slaughter of up to 2.5 million Russian citizens. And once that program ended, not a single NKVD officer did a single day in jail, okay? That's the mold that clandestine gang stalking is crafted in. It's supposed to be essentially unprosecutable crimes against people, you see, and that prospect alone is enough motivation for some people to participate in it. Okay, there are some people, I mean, you could walk up to people on the street, people of any walk of life, and tell them, hey, I could get you plugged into a program where you could make your life more interesting, you could make your life more adventurous, and you may be able to gain something financially from this program And you get to commit crimes against people with no chance of incarceration or punishment to yourself. You want to join up? There are people that you could just walk up to on the street, people from many different walks of life, that would jump at the opportunity to participate in such a program. You see, the idea of being able to commit wrongs or errors against your fellow man with no recourse is a very appealing prospect to some people. So in this MKUltra experiment that was done completely at the expense of the test subjects, whether these test subjects were seeking psychiatric care and exposed to it, or maybe they were participating in a college or university test study on psychological conditions and exposed to MKUltra, or whether they were just people who were exposed to it at social settings or gatherings like dinner parties or corporate events or similar events. You know, whatever the venue was when you were exposed to the MKUltra canon of psychological attacks, regardless of the venue, you were expendable. And you were seen as essentially an expendable test subject. And as I walk, I got stalkers to my right and left walking in the same general direction as me. It's so obvious. I mean, this program is very sloppily executed. I'd be embarrassed to participate in it, as easy as these people are to sniff out. But ultimately, ladies and gentlemen, this is the nature of the proverbial beast. Okay? I've read online testimony from other people who identify as targeted individuals who say, yeah, they make it obvious. That's something that a lot of targeted individuals become aware of, is that the stalkers make it obvious that they're following you, that they're pestering you, that they're on to you. And that's part of sort of the shock and awe of the program, is that they're not trying to be secretive. They want you to know you're being stalked. They want you to know you're being pestered. They want you to know you're being harassed. And they want you to know that despite you knowing, they're going to continue doing it. And this being in spite of federal, state, and local laws restricting such horrible behavior from the Departments of Defense and Justice. So, I'm going to move on to the next article. And ladies and gentlemen, this lecture will go across the 1 hour mark. All right, here's another document. And mind you, ladies and gentlemen, all these documents are federally kept. This is from the Chronicle of Higher Education, dated 25th of January, 1980. The subject is the CIA files a brief in mind control suit. And this paragraph reads, the Central Intelligence Agency argues that more harm than good would result from the disclosure of the names of university researchers involved in mind control experiments financed by the agency in the 1950s and 60s. In response to a suit filed last year by John Kerry Sims, a lawyer for Ralph Nader's Public Citizen Litigation Group, a U.S. District Judge, Louis Oberdorfer, ordered the CIA to release the names of researchers involved in human behavior modification projects known by the code MKUltra. Although the CIA released some names of individuals and institutions involved, it appealed the lower court ruling. In a brief filed this month with the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia, The agency argued that full disclosure could not only damage reputations, but substantially harm the CIA's ability to develop intelligence sources. So what we see here, ladies and gentlemen, is we see an instance of consumer action being taken against the FBI, against the CIA for putting people through this program, MKUltra, which is described in this article as behavior modification. And that's something that I've long argued that gang stalking is. It is behavior modification. It's not just human experimentation. They don't just want to gather data on your reaction to your surroundings or your stalker's reaction to your surroundings. They want to modify your behavior. They want to change your personality. You see, they want to see how easy or how difficult it would be to make you into a different person, not in any test study or any type of controlled experiment, but out in the open as you're living your actual life. What we see here, ladies and gentlemen, is a definitive testimony that Project MKUltra was a human behavior modification project. Now, there are two kinds of behavior modification projects that exist. There's animal behavior modification projects, and then there's human behavior modification projects. And what they're saying is, for example, like, if you have a dog, or if you have a cat, or maybe you have a chimpanzee or a gorilla or a wolf or a sheep or a horse or a donkey or a cow or a buffalo or a hippopotamus or a sea animal like a sea lion or a manatee or an orca or a killer whale. Okay, these are animals that you can run behavior modification experiments on to try and change their behavior from one behavior to another behavior. You see, and there are many different scientific ways of changing the behavior of an actual beast. But if you're talking about a living, breathing human, there's a whole nother ball game. There's a whole nother element. There's a whole nother protocol that's separate from the kinds of protocols you use to change the behavior of animals. You see, if you're going to change the behavior of a human, given the complexities in human emotion and human thought and human action, as opposed to an animal, there are extensive measures that you have to take, and it's a multi-year protocol. But like I say, like gang stalking, MKUltra was not a situation where CIA analyst or CIA psychologist or CIA scientist or CIA biologists got together and said, we're going to do a test study. And this test study is going to involve human subjects. It's going to be taxpayer funded. It's going to be a multi-year study. We're going to invite people to come in on a random basis by mail or phone call to participate in this study, and they'll be paid for their contribution to this study and for being test subjects. They'll be notified right away what the risks are, what the benefits are, and what we hope to accomplish in this human behavior modification test study. And we'll report our findings to the Congress of the United States. Indeed, we'll report our findings to the American people. That's not what happened, ladies and gentlemen. These people were randomly chosen, and during psychiatric evaluations or psychology evaluations or medical exams, or perhaps if one of these selected subjects was at a social gathering like a party or a group event, or perhaps a corporate event, or maybe they were at a social club or some other gathering, they were exposed to mind-altering elements. And it didn't stop there. These people were routinely exposed to various mind altering and behavior modification elements that included substances and derived interactions with other persons as they were out and about as well. It was almost like a mini gang stalking campaign that they were putting people in. And Ralph Nader, who is a consumer advocate and someone that has, I think he ran for president in 2004, if I'm not mistaken, as an independent. He's a consumer advocate, and he basically in the 70s, 80s, and 90s ran a watchdog group that sort of monitored how various companies, corporations, businesses, and government components were interacting with U.S. citizens. And his mission was to ensure that organized entities were treating the United States people lawfully in their dealings with the United States people. And Ralph Nader got in on this discussion. And he had a litigation group, and he initiated lots of lawsuits. This is something that he did over the course of his career as a consumer advocate. He launched a lot of class action lawsuits against governmental and private entities for not acting lawfully with the American people on a number of different issues. So he got in on this conversation, and he got together with one of his lawyers, and they sued the CIA, but they didn't sue the CIA for monetary damages. They sued the CIA for the release of information. Okay, we are filing a lawsuit against the CIA to release the names of the researchers involved in Project MKUltra. And the CIA released some of the names of individuals and institutions involved. And it appealed the lower court ruling. And the reason that the CIA didn't release all the names of the people involved is because it believed that that those people's names and reputations would be damaged, and it would inhibit the CIA's ability to develop intelligence sources in the future. So what the CIA said here was, we'll release some people's names, we'll release the names of some of the institutions that were involved in MKUltra, and we're not going to release all the names because we don't want anyone's name or reputation to be damaged. So the CIA knew that the release of these people's names would potentially damage their reputations. Okay, that's how controversial MKUltra was. That's how controversial their methods was. That's how controversial their mission was. Especially in an environment like the United States, which has always billed itself as a constitutional republic, as a democratic society, as a country that's free, a country that's fair, a country that has a Bill of Rights and values human rights, liberties, and freedoms. You see, these experiments were happening in that country, the United States. And the CIA is saying, look, you caught us. We didn't expect you to catch us, but you caught us. And now that you've caught us, we're going to partially comply with the request of this lawsuit. We're going to release some of the names of the people involved. We're going to release a few of the names of the institutions involved, but we're not going to release all the information because we don't want anyone's reputation to be damaged behind this. So the CIA went into damage control mode when Ralph Nader's Public Citizen Litigation Group sued the CIA for information. All right, we are going to move on to the next document. All right, this next document is from the New York Times. It's dated August 4th, 1977. This article appeared on page 36 of that day's newspaper clipping. And the title of it is 80 Institutions Used in CIA Mind Studies. All right, and it says that Admiral Turner tells senators of behavior control research bars drug testing. Now, this article is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 paragraphs long. I'm going to give summaries of each paragraph as opposed to reading them word for word, but I will start with the author of this news article, Nicholas M. Horrock, who is billed as a special to the New York Times. Stansfield Turner, the director of the Central Intelligence Agency, testified today that the CIA secretly supported human behavior control research at 80 institutions, including 44 colleges or universities, as well as hospitals, prisons, and pharmaceutical companies. Now, I'm going to stop there because earlier in this lecture, I described the kinds of venues that were used in Project MKULTRA as hospitals, psychiatric, psychologist offices, private psychiatric practices, social events and gatherings, and other institutions. We now see in more depth and in more detail what some of those other institutions are. Now, I was aware previously that colleges were part of the MKUltra, we'll call it the menu of venues, because there are a lot of young people there, some of which are experimenting with drugs and other substances, getting together in social gatherings, ingesting large quantities of illegal substances. So these colleges and institutions were a favorite venue for some of MKUltra's protocols and procedures, because it included social gatherings like the ones I mentioned earlier in the lecture, and hospitals, prisons, and pharmaceutical companies as well. So some of what was going on in MKUltra was happening in hospitals and prisons as well. People seeking hospital cares, people who were incarcerated in prisons, probably some of the prison staff workers, etc., were exposed to some of what was happening in this human behavior experimentation module, and not just the staged events or the staged interactions or the derived events or the derived interactions in between the workers and the test subjects, but also the arbitrary spreading of hallucinogenic substances, probably in powder form, being thrown up into the air around people in a covert way. And you have many different people ingesting this substance at the same time. They all start hallucinating together, and it creates an interesting spectacle. But not just that, what are these people's behavior after their high ends? And what are people saying about it? Do they report it? Do they not report it? Et cetera, et cetera. And there are other aspects to this that we'll get into later that constitutes the human mind control elements of it. No doubt these people, the test subjects, because they were unwitting and because they were considered expendable, their very lives expendable, in the grand scheme of things, there's no telling what other types of materials were administered to them in this mind control experiment. It says that he told a joint hearing of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence and the Senate Health Subcommittee that recently discovered financial records indicating that the most intense period of the MKUltra program consisted of 185 non-government researchers in 149 separate research projects. He said that the main action years of MKUltra were from 1953 through 1963. The projects, he said, had included tests of LSD and of K, or knockout drop, which it's some kind of an acid that was being administered to people without their knowledge. Probably some people were repeatedly exposed to it. And the people that were doing the administering of these drugs may have not known that they were administering these drugs to people. They may have been lied to and said this is a new energy drink, or a new insomnia solution, or a new cough medicine that we're testing on people. That's the test subject right there. And the person that was administering these drugs to the people may have not known that they were administering drugs to people, because they may have been lied to by the experimenters as to what they were giving the test subjects. So there's a quote here. It is totally abhorrent to me to think of using humans as guinea pigs, Admiral Turner said, adding, "I assure you that the CIA is no way engaged in either unwitting or witting testing of drugs today," which we know now to be false. The CIA was administering drugs to unwitting patients in various situations and settings. And these hallucinogenic drugs included acid and LSD. And that's a matter of fact. I mean, that's something that we know for a fact. It's historically documented at this point. And some of these unwitting test soldiers were U.S. soldiers. There were actually Vietnam soldiers in the late 60s that were exposed to MKUltra's test protocols and so forth. And it was considered fairly controversial given the nature of the war and how hotly contested the war was and how controversial the war was, to use Vietnam War soldiers as test experiments for this program. I mean, they're already in harm's way as it is. And then you're going to put them in even more harm's way, and put their lives in even more peril. Okay, on the battlefield by forcing them without their knowledge or consent to ingest hallucinogenic drugs. I mean, what if some of those soldiers were hallucinating on the battlefield because of Project MKUltra? I mean, how many Vietnam War soldiers lost their lives on the battlefield because they were given hallucinogenic drugs before the action started? Okay? In the theater of war, it's already difficult to maintain your focus when you're in a shootout with the enemy, or perhaps you're exchanging mortar fire with the enemy, or perhaps you're throwing grenades at the enemy. They're throwing explosive devices at you. You're maneuvering, you're ducking, you're taking orders, you're giving orders, you're working in the trenches, you're trying to clear an area. You are in a hot battle with the enemy. And then in the middle of all that chaos, you start hallucinating off of LSD. You start hallucinating off of acid. You start hallucinating off of shrooms while you're fighting in a hot battle with the enemy. Okay? You're going to lose your focus, and you're going to get blown up in that battle. Or chopped in half with a AK-47. I mean, take your pick. So, ladies and gentlemen, it begs the question, how many Vietnam soldiers were subject to the effects of MKUltra on the battlefield? did MKUltra contribute to the unnecessary loss of life to soldiers who were being exposed to its perils while in a hot battle? So Admiral Turner said that there are 8,000 pages of newly discovered documents that do not contain the names of subjects of the tests, but do contain leads that might enable them to be found. And part of the reason the CIA kept the names of the, we'll call them the human test experiments, private is because if their names were to be released, okay, because a lot of the people that suffered the damages of MKUltra didn't realize until later that they had been exposed to various, not just LSD or acid, but they were exposed to a lot of experimental drugs without their knowledge or consent during this program in a variety of settings and situations. As this article said, colleges, universities, hospitals, prisons, doctor's office, psychiatric facilities, psychological clinics, private practices. I mean, there were a ton of venues throughout the United States, okay, more than 8,000, okay, more than 80 institutions that were essentially breeding grounds for MKUltra activity, and a lot of people that were exposed to MKUltra experienced horrible health problems because, again, there were so many chemicals and substances that they were forced to ingest without their knowledge in a variety of social and institution and clinical settings. And if these people knew that they had been tricked into ingesting chemicals that could possibly harm them or even take in their life, they would have all sued the CIA individually, and the CIA probably would have had to pay out tens or even hundreds of billions of dollars in lawsuit money, and eventually the CIA would probably have to close down. Okay, no government agency is invincible. No government agency is invincible. Any government agency could be taken down and dismantled. It doesn't matter what what agency it is. I mean, in the mid 2000s, you heard people saying we want to abolish the IRS. In the late 2000s, you heard people say we want to abolish the Department of Homeland Security. We've heard we want to abolish the Federal Reserve System. We've heard we want to abolish the FBI. I've heard politicians argue for the abolishment of the FBI. I mean, these political matters wouldn't be raised if it weren't possible. Okay, the CIA could be abolished and done away with. The U.S. Postal Service could be abolished and done away with. Okay, no government institution is undissolvable. Any government institution can be abolished. Any government institution can be abolished if it's found to be ineffective or inefficient in its role of cultivating progress in American society. Any government auxiliary can be abolished. Okay, even the police can be defunded if they're deemed to be deleterious to American society. Okay, the Department of Defense can be abolished if it's deemed deleterious to American society. Okay, any government auxiliary can be abolished. And the CIA was essentially fighting for its very existence when information about MKUltra came into the public eye. I mean, think of it, 8,000 test subjects whose names were not released, okay, were federally kept. And there's no telling if the CIA has those 8,000 names still in its federal registries. It's possible that the people's names were destroyed, or any record of these people's names were destroyed, so that these people would not be able to have knowledge that they were unwitting test subjects in mind control experiments by the CIA. Could you imagine 8,000 citizens all suing the U.S. federal government at the same time because of mind control experiments done on them by the CIA? The damage that would do to the reputation of this country, the damage that would do to the reputation of the Central Intelligence Agency, it would be catastrophic. They'd have to pay out billions in revenues to these litigants. Okay, and eventually, the CIA would have to be abolished. And it'd be a worldwide embarrassment for the United States. So the CIA kept those people's names private, because they didn't want those people to find out, hey, you know what? It's saying here I'm a test subject. I'm gonna go ahead and sue this country, right? It's the same with clandestine gang stalking, ladies and gentlemen. They don't want nobody coming forward with this information, ladies and gentlemen. The federal government doesn't want Emmanuel Isaiah Smith coming forward with this information. Okay, it's embarrassing. The U.S. federal government doesn't want its image and its reputation to be harmed by Emmanuel Isaiah Smith. The CIA or the U.S. federal establishment would rather me just keep my mouth shut and live through it. And then if gang stalking requires my life of me, then so be it. Okay, that's always been the United States federal government's attitude towards test subjects and these various experiments that it conducts on people without their knowledge or consent. You know, if one of these stalkers gives me a horrible sickness through airborne bacterial disease communication or food contamination, or if one of these stalkers takes a signal and runs me over with a Mack truck, or if one of these stalkers knocks me down a 30 story building off of some signal, or if an airplane I'm on blows up in midair because of faulty gas and fuel injector practices, or if I get killed in a drive-by by a crazed Cuban narco terrorist, or some other horrible catastrophe, my stalkers, the undercover operatives that are assigned to me and the liaisons, they'd wipe the sweat off their head and go, whew, I'm so glad he's gone. He was on the verge of exposing everything we do in this country. All right, these people are not my friend. And they are of the mindset that what I'm doing with my Gang Stalking in Action live video series, with my EIS Media Group lecture series, to them, I'm doing the country a disservice. You see, there are some people that would like to keep their dirt hidden and quiet. They don't want to be exposed. They don't want people like me coming forward and exposing everything that they do. They don't want that. They would rather say, Smith, be patriotic. Be patriotic. Be quiet about this. Don't come forward about clandestine gang stalking. We know it's dangerous. We know you're a human test subject and probably have been your entire life. We know that you were been a targeted individual all these years and have run into countless perils as a result of your targeting. We know that. We know that we expose you to dangerous situations on a daily basis, but be patriotic, Smith. Be patriotic. Don't accuse us of clandestine thuggery or state-sanctioned murder or any of the horrible things you accuse this country of. That could hurt our hurt our reputation at home and abroad. Stand down, Smith. Don't make your country look like a tomfoolish clown show. Don't expose us. Just be patriotic, Smith, and tolerate what we're putting you through. How old are you now, Smith? 40? 40 years old, Smith? This is what they're saying to me. You're 40 years old right now, Smith. How much longer you got left on this earth anyway? Maybe another 40 years? You're at the halfway point, Smith. No need to tear your country down at this point in your life. You only got 40 years left on this earth. Don't do this thing, Smith. That's what the federal establishment of this country is saying to me. Don't do this thing. Don't do this thing, Smith. Be patriotic. Just let us trample you with our army of useful idiot gang stalkers. Just let us. Let us do it. Be patriotic, Smith. Okay, be patriotic. Do your duty as a United States citizen and let us continue perpetrating clandestine gang stalking against you without you saying nothing about it, Smith. Don't do this thing, Smith. Don't do this thing to your country. In the name of all that's good and holy, Smith, don't do this thing. Right? That's what they're saying to me, ladies and gentlemen. They're saying, think of all the brave men and women who have lost their lives in combat over the past 200 years of this country. Think of them, Smith. Don't degrade or denigrate the country that they lost their lives for. Don't do this thing, Smith. Allow us to use our army of signaled pesterers, harassers, and annoyers to come around you, Smith, and do as we please. It's part of the program. We're making society better by using you and your life as human doormats, Smith. Just think of yourself as a punching bag for society, Smith. Be patriotic and be that punching bag for your fellow man, Smith. Okay? Great is your reward in heaven. Think of heaven, Smith. You're already 40 years old. What do you got, another 40 to 45 years top, Smith? Great is your reward in heaven. Let us stomp on you and trample you using our army of stalkers. It's good research we're doing, Smith. It's good human behavior research. It's good data collection we're doing on you, Smith. And the taxpayer is paying good money, Smith, for us to be able to do this to you. All the surveillance equipment and sound equipment and a human mobilization stratagem and all the military industrial grade technology we're using to make your gang stalking run. Okay, we're paying good money and we're doing a good work for future generations, Smith. Allow us to perpetrate these crimes against humanity, Smith, against you. It'll make society better. Okay? That's what they're saying to me, ladies and gentlemen. They're saying, this is well thought out, Smith, and if something bad happens to you, if you lose your life at 40 or 41 or 50 or 51, or perhaps we send a stalker to do away with you at the age of 60, you've lived a good life, Smith. Go on ahead and render yourself unto us in the name of the progression of future generations. We could use the data that we're collecting on you, Smith, to make future generations better. All right, that's what they're saying to me, ladies and gentlemen. The U.S. federal establishment is saying this to me right now. All right, now think of the heroes of old, ladies and gentlemen. The heroes of antiquity. Okay, the ones that fought for their very life, the ones that fought for their very freedoms. What if their enemies or rather their oppressors, came to them in such a way and said, well, you might as well let us oppress you. We've already been doing it for 40 years. You might as well go on ahead and let us do it for the next 40. You're only one man. This world goes on without you. Society goes on without you. Humanity continues on without you. The experiments we're running on you, we could use to make future generations' lives better and more pleasant. Just be patriotic, Smith. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm saying to hell with that argument. And the reason I'm saying that is because, first and foremost, as a human being having been born into this world, having been conceived by two parents, and having been bestowed upon me a set of inalienable rights that are given to me by a combination of God the Creator and or nature, as a man, I'm going to take those rights if they're not handed to me, you see. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to continue on with this lecture here. It's saying here that there was another operation that may have taken place through the Department of the Army. Okay, we're going to skip over a couple of paragraphs. We're going to start with through the main active years for MKULTRA were 1953 to 1963. The CIA is conducting an internal inquiry to determine what its role may have been in a project coordinated with the Department of the Army, codenamed Often Chickwit, that was active until 1973. So it wasn't, well, so it was essentially MKULTRA from 1953 to 63. Those were the primary years that this program was operating. But there's also another operation that the CIA coordinated with the Department of the Army called Often Chickwit, which is a strange name for a mind control experiment, but that operation may have run for 10 years by itself, from 1963 to 1973. So you have MKULTRA and Operation Chickwit, apparently. And Operation Chickwit is something that involved Georgetown University Hospital, which was where many of Washington's most powerful figures went for treatment. And Ted Kennedy's son was treated for cancer there. And apparently the agency was seeking an institution where its own personnel could test a lot of drugs on people, including a knockout pill, which is probably this knockout pill that you've been hearing about, where it gets you so high you just don't know where you're at, and it has the capacity to cause you to go to sleep. But like gang stalking, Project MKUltra essentially put organized pesterers on an assembly line. They just come at you one after the other, after the other, after the other, off of signals. And it's funny that these persons think that I'm going to just go along with this. I mean, the subjects of COINTELPRO eventually exposed the program. The subjects of MKULTRA eventually exposed the program. And the subjects of gang stalking are going to expose this program as well. The difference between the three is this. There seems to be more of a campaign with gang stalking to deny its existence and to paint the people who come forward about it as psychotic or crazy or insane or suffering from personality disorders, mood disorders, or schizophrenic paranoia. Okay, that's the difference between gang stalking and MKULTRA and COINTELPRO. All three involved the Departments of Defense and Justice operating in a synchronous fashion to conduct human experimentation protocols on U.S. citizens. All three are the same in that regard. But when people started coming forward about COINTELPRO, it was investigated by the media. It was investigated by Congress. It was investigated by the Departments of Defense and Justice. When people started coming forward about MKULTRA, it was investigated by the media. It was investigated by Congress. It was investigated by the Departments of Defense and Justice. But there seems to be sort of a procedure with respect to gang stalking that's a little different, right? So with gang stalking, people are coming forward about it, but it's not being met with the same sense of urgency that MKULTRA and COINTELPRO were met with when these programs were exposed. Gang stalking is being treated a little differently. The media has taken no interest in it. There have been no congressional hearings on it. And the Departments of Defense and Justice are ignoring people's complaints about it. So it's like it was almost as if the U.S. federal establishment learned its lesson from MKULTRA and COINTELPRO. Don't give any credit to the people who expose it. You see, because once MKULTRA and COINTELPRO were exposed by the general public and investigated and made public even further by the news media and by Congress through congressional hearings, now those programs have to end. Now the Departments of Defense and Justice have to apologize for those programs and risk looking bad. You see, when they put gang stalking together, they essentially eliminated those possibilities of people coming forward and exposing it, looking like heroes and making the U.S. federal government look like an evil empire who sees its own citizens as expendable, right? But it don't matter. The U.S. Congress doesn't have to do nothing about it. The U.S. Congress doesn't have to do nothing about it. I'd like them to, but they don't have to. The media, they don't have to do nothing about it either. I'd like them to, but they don't have to, okay? If I'm the only voice on planet Earth exposing this program to the degree that I am, then so be it. It's still being looked at. It's still being documented. It's still being researched and analyzed by third parties. Whether or not you want to admit its existence or not, whether you want to vilify the people coming forward about this as psychotic or not, it doesn't change a thing. This is a program that operates in the same vein as COINTELPRO, as MKULTRA, as the Schutzstaffel of Nazi Germany, as the NKVD of Soviet Russia, as the OVRA of World War II era Italy. Okay, it operates in the same vein. And it is designed to disrupt the lives of some and enhance the lives of others in accordance with what the orchestrators or the architects of gang stalking think this country should operate like. Let's throw constitutional republicanism out the window. Let's throw democratic values down the toilet. This country is going to operate the way the intelligence and national security apparatus want it to operate as. We don't care about no George Washington. We don't care about Abraham Lincoln. We don't care about General Zachary Taylor. We don't care about Thomas Jefferson. Okay, we don't care about John Hancock or Benjamin Franklin or anyone that is considered one of the early heroes of American politics. We don't care about the founding fathers of this country. They'll say, we're going to run this country the way we want to run it, and we're going to make sure that the people who we're going to make sure that that people who find success are handpicked, and people who don't find success are handpicked by us. And we're going to use a team, a standing army of American signal takers that are given signals and instructions on who to hurt in this country and who to help in this country. And the targeted individuals, ladies and gentlemen, we're the ones getting hurt by this. All right, so we are going to move on down to the next article. This newspaper article is let's see. All right, this is an article from the Boston Globe. This is dated February 1st, 1978. The title of this article is Harvard-Aided CIA Projects, and this is Harvard University, the world-renowned university, ladies and gentlemen. It says here, Harvard University yesterday confirmed reports that it unknowingly participated in 2 research projects funded by the Central Intelligence Agency in the Central Intelligence Agency in the 1950s and in the 1960s as part of the agency's controversial MKULTRA project. Daniel Steiner, Harvard's general counsel, said in a prepared statement that the projects involved a total of $78,000 in funds, and neither involved drugs or testing on human subjects. MKUltra, a $25 million CIA program that included research on human behavior and brainwashing techniques, came under fire last summer after disclosures that it included tests on unwitting human subjects and sometimes the administering of LSD and other hallucinogenics. Of the 2 projects at Harvard, Steiner said one involved the use of teaching machines in foreign language instructions, although he said he could find no one now at the university who remembered the work, and the second was similarly non-controversial. He said that he would not reveal information about the second project because the researchers' request for privacy outweighed the university's interests in full disclosure and in the public's right to know. So this is interesting because Harvard University came forward and said, look, we were involved in a number of projects in the 50s and 60s that included test subjects and so forth, but we did not know that it was MKUltra, and we did not know that we were potentially damaging people's brains with this technology. You see, so Harvard University was lied to and tricked by the CIA into participating in studies that were potentially hazardous to the test subjects. It's not much unlike clandestine gang stalking, ladies and gentlemen. A lot of the people that participate in clandestine gang stalking don't realize that they're participating in clandestine gang stalking. They think they're participating in something cool, something fun, something hip, something dangerous, something different, something adventurous, something fast-paced, that allows them to interact with people in a strategic way. They don't realize that what they're participating in is clandestine thuggery. You see, when government agencies get together and run these programs on people, they don't always tell the administrators of that program that what they're participating in is thuggery. Okay? You're going to see that a lot throughout this lecture, where companies and individuals, researchers, and so forth are coming forward saying, these tests that we were running as a part of this CIA program, we didn't realize that it was called MKUltra, and we weren't told that these tests were potentially hazardous to the test subjects. Okay, the same thing is going to happen with gang stalking. You're going to get people coming forward. You're going to see institutions and entities coming forward and saying, hey, yeah, we did this, we did that, we used this protocol and this disruption technique and that disruption technique. And yeah, we acted like total jerks, and we acted like a bunch of farm animals regularly as gang stalkers, but we didn't know that what we were participating in was called gang stalking, right? It's the same thing here. Of the two projects at Harvard, Steiner said one involved the use of teaching machines in foreign language instruction. It's kind of like an early artificial intelligence module, although it doesn't get into much detail as to what that particular machine learning dialogue was supposed to do. I mean, it's perhaps they were using early manifestations of stem receivers or other brainwave manipulation technology with that, with people who spoke languages other than English. I'm sure there were more than just English-speaking people that were the subjects of those MKUltra tests. So the next article we have here is from the CIA Operations Center. It's dated September 27th, 1977. It's a news service that's distributed by the CIA Operations Center. Cambridge, Massachusetts. This is apparently an Associated Press article. Harvard University says it conducted 2 human behavior research projects for the CIA, but denies participating in CIA-sponsored testing of LSD and other drugs on humans. Monday's announcement was Harvard's first disclosure on its involvement. It gave no details of the work done for the CIA, but said a full statement on the projects is being prepared. The Harvard announcement of involvement in the CIA's MKUltra Human Behavior Project follows similar reports by the Massachusetts Institute of Technology and California Stanford University outlining their involvement in CIA-funded projects. The Boston Globe claims that the new disclosures point up incomplete record-keeping on the experiments by both the CIA and the institutions involved. The Globe says MIT was involved in at least 3 of 135 MKUltra projects carried on nationwide. Dr. Edward Schein, an MIT professor, said 2 weeks ago that he took CIA money for a brainwashing research. The studies resulted in a book entitled Coercive Persuasion. An MIT spokesman said Monday that the CIA had not notified the School of Schein's research. The university had previously disclosed only a study of Soviet scientists as possible defectors. So what we see in this article, ladies and gentlemen, is we see where Harvard University has elaborated on its participation in the CIA's MKUltra project. What it's saying is, without actually saying it, is that it was deceived. It did projects for the CIA, but it's saying that it didn't do state-sponsored testing of LSD and other drugs during those human behavioral studies. But chances are Harvard did administer LSD and brain-altering substances to test subjects without knowing it. Because, quite frankly, when these government programs run, whatever the government auxiliary is that's the architect of the program, they don't always tell everyone everything that they're doing. They just give them instructions and orders and the people carry it out, but there's something else happening. So for example, let's say the orchestrators of MKUltra went to these Harvard and MIT, which is the Massachusetts Institution of Technology, these professors, and paid these people to take part in brainwashing experiments. They don't tell the experimenters everything that's going on. They don't tell them we're testing drugs on people. They don't tell them how deeply or to what extent this brainwashing is to take place. They just give them their orders, they pay them the money, and the people who are the researchers at Harvard or MIT conduct the experiments however they're told to. But later on, apparently, these people came forward and said we didn't realize that we were administering hallucinogenic drugs to people. That wasn't told to us. Okay. So, the next article. And also it said there was a study of Soviet scientists as possible defectors. So apparently there were some Soviet scientists at Massachusetts Institution of Technology who declined to participate in the study. All right, next article. This is from the New York Times, October 7th, 1977. Circumcision tests in 1961 disclosed in CIA data. The Central Intelligence Agency conducted experiments 16 years ago on circumcised boys to determine whether the operation left any emotional after effects, according to secret documents released Friday by the agency. The aim was to determine whether circumcision at a significant stage in the boy's development produced anxiety such as fear of castration, according to the heavily censored documents. The inability to resolve castration complex is linked with the later emotional disorders, notably homosexuality, said one of the CIA's research paper that discussed the experiments. In 1961, the document showed the agency approved a series of tests on 15 boys between the ages of 5 and 7 from low-income families. The National Health Service, which chose the boys from a culture whose identity was deleted from the documents, which are latest in a series released by the CIA in response to a request under the Freedom of Information Act. The documents chronicle a massive program codenamed MKUltra conducted in the 1950s and 60s to control human behavior through the use of primarily mind-altering drugs. Admiral Stansfield Turner, the director of Central Intelligence, said recently that the agency no longer conducts such experiments and has taken steps to ensure that such tests will never be conducted again. Okay, this is one of the more bizarre experiments that occurred through the MKUltra, under the MKUltra umbrella. They were apparently finding teenage boys to participate in circumcision tests to see if there were any emotional after effects. Circumcision is when the foreskin of the male penis is removed using a blade or a laser, causing the foreskin to come off and the skin around the tip of the penis to recede, making it easier to clean, etc., etc. Or rather, making it easier to clean the male member. What they're trying to say here is that as a part of MKUltra, boys that were between the ages of 5 and 7 from low-income families were circumcised in an attempt to see what their emotional state would be after the circumcision, and to see if any of those boys become homosexuals later in their life because of the castration anxiety. So I guess they wanted these boys to resolve within themselves whether or not they were still men or still males, or rather straight males, from having their foreskin removed, which, I mean, again, this study, as I said at the beginning of this lecture, is bizarre. To me, it doesn't make any sense at all that a straight boy or a boy who has genuine attractions to females would become what this article describes as an anxious homosexual simply from having experienced circumcision. A circumcision is not a castration, but they're saying that these circumcisions might cause castration anxiety in these boys. And they're going to apparently monitor these boys over the next few years to see what their behaviors, their sexual behaviors become, which is bizarre because, again, 5 years old, 6 years old, 7 years old, you undergo something like a circumcision. It's a very routine, very common surgical procedure that has not produced any testable evidence as to a man's sexual behaviors. There's no link between being circumcised or being uncircumcised and whether or not you decide to be straight or homosexual. There's no data in existence that tests whether or not one or the other is the result of circumcision or not being circumcised. So this is just a bizarre experiment. It doesn't appear to have any scientific value at all. And its auspices are a little strange. Okay, it almost seems as if the CIA just wanted an excuse to use the genitals of little boys as an experimental procedure, just to say they use the genitals of little boys as an experimental procedure. I mean, there doesn't appear to be any value to anything that's being asserted here. We'll move on to the next article here. This is from the Washington Post newspaper. It's dated August 6, 1977. Senators would force, this is a news article, senators would force 4 CIA mind controllers to testify. 4 former members of a secret CIA behavioral control project were subpoenaed yesterday to testify publicly about drug tests and other human mind control experiments conducted in the 50s and 60s. The subpoenas were issued by Senator Edward M. Kennedy's Subcommittee on Health and Scientific Research and Walter P. Pasternak did not show up at a closed subcommittee session. The subpoenas are for September 9th. They're essentially Pasternak, who is apparently a senator, has been leaked to one or more of the bizarre projects for MKULTRA, which is the code name for the intelligence agency's mind control experiments. Senate investigators have receipts signed by former CIA employees for $2,000 and $100 bills that were distributed to the persons involved in Operation Midnight Climax. That project involved alleged prostitutes and drugs given to unwitting persons lured into a safe house operated by I don't know, the district attorney. It just says DA in San Francisco. Pasternak has also provided the subcommittee with somewhat unclear accounts of the activities of the Society of the Investigation of Human Ecology, a CIA-funded research group that conducted human behavior experiments. In addition to Pasternak, the senators subpoenaed by Dr. Sidney Gudaleb, a retired CIA official who ran MKULTRA, Dr. Robert Lashbrook, a former CIA chemist who now teaches at the University of California in Santa Barbara, and Dr. Charles Cheskik, a former CIA consultant and professor emeritus at Georgetown University. Details of MKUltra have been widely publicized since the CIA recently released 8,000 pages of recently discovered documents relating to the experiments. In San Francisco yesterday, CIA Director Stansfield Turner called the drug and brothel activities abhorrent and said the number of such CIA operations is now 0. So I'm going to stop right there, ladies and gentlemen. The 4 of the mind controllers, or 4 of what you might describe as the architects of MKUltra, were going to be subpoenaed to testify before a Senate committee by Senator Ted Kennedy. So Senator Ted Kennedy, and mind you, you might notice, at least I've noticed through my examination of these documents, that there are more Democratic senators that have taken an interest in bringing the orchestrators of this project to justice. Now, that's not to say that there's any sort of a moral or ethical lapse in judgment with respect to Democrats or Republicans. It's just that when it comes to investigations over and across the spectrum of investigatable crimes or instances of corruption that have occurred among the elite in American society, Democrats have always taken the lead on these things. I mean, going back as far as you can remember, I mean, even when you look at, for examples, we're in Black History Month right now. I think civil rights deserves a look in these matters. So in the civil rights movement, it was mostly Democrats that took the lead in making it a federal priority. When there were atrocities in Vietnam being committed by the soldiers against civilians, it was Democrats that stood up and said, we want to investigate these crimes against humanity that are happening against the Vietnamese people. If you look at things like social welfare or incarceration rates or prison terms, the fairness of the administration of capital punishment, the Iraq War, social justice and equity, okay, these are things that the Democrats have always stood up and made a priority. Republicans have always taken a more nationalistic approach to corruption and shocking scandals like this. And it's possible that these Republicans have personal problems with what's happening, but it's the Democrats that have stood up to the plate on this issue of MKUltra. You know, it's difficult to ascertain whether or not Democrats will stand up to the issue of gang stalking. I believe President Trump, for example, is a decent man. He's always been the kind of person that has not shied away from calling out corrupt actors or deleterious actors in American government. He seems like the kind of renegade Republican type to call out clandestine gang stalking as a deleterious thing. I am a bit surprised at the silence of the Democrat Party on clandestine gang stalking. Democrats have always been, and mind you, I'm a Republican myself. I'm a registered Republican. But I am fully aware of the Democrats' track record of looking into government scandals like this and taking the lead on them. But I haven't heard a single Democrat anywhere in the country talk about clandestine gang stalking. Now, that's not to say that they're deleterious themselves. It's just the silence is deafening on this topic, not only with respect to the Democrats, but with respect to the Republicans as well. There are a lot of Democrats and Republicans that I think are decent people that I would like to see speak out on this matter in various capacities when the time comes, but obviously the time is definitely now. So these 4 mind control testers for the CIA are going to be subpoenaed by this Democrat, Edward Kennedy. And mind you, this is the type of testimony that could make the CIA look horrible. Okay, and today's CIA is a little more careful as to how it manages its interactions with people that it's doing illegal experimentations on. Mind you, ladies and gentlemen, the Nuremberg laws that came about after the annihilation of the Nazi regime made human experimentation illegal. And here we have the United States, the freest country in the world, doing human experimentations on people. And it's kind of ironic because the United States was the enemy of Nazi Germany. But here the United States is using Nazi German era tactics on unwitting citizens. And what I'll do is I'll stop here and say briefly, my gang stalkers are desperately trying to prove to foreign and domestic observers that what they're doing are harmless pranks against me in a synchronous fashion and that none of it is dangerous. Again, stalkers, undercover operatives, liaisons, I'm calling you a bunch of dirty cowards, okay? You see you have federal eyes on you. You see that there are foreign eyes on you. The world is watching, and you're trying to make this program look like a bunch of harmless and stupid pranks that you're pulling on me. For the past 30 years, you have constantly exposed me to dangerous situations, to dangerous people, to dangerous automotive maneuvers. You've disrupted me at work. You've disrupted me at school using a bunch of clandestine disruptors and agent provocateurs. You've disrupted me at church. You've artificially introduced bacterial contaminations against me through the air. You vandalized my home and car. You've cost me valuable work and educational opportunities. You've hacked my data and gave it to my enemies. You've hacked my data and gave it to people who would like to see me harmed. You've hacked my data and sold it to people. You've sold my location to people. You've sold my significant other's location to people. You've tried to harm her equally as badly as you've tried to harm me. And quite frankly, you hoped that I would never find out about this. You hoped that clandestine gang stalking would end my life so you could ride off into the sunset like a pack of Wild Wild West Rangers or Wild Wild West Cowboys or something. You know exactly what you've done, and you trying to downplay it because there are foreign and domestic eyes on me looking at what I'm experiencing on a daily basis. You ought to be ashamed of yourself. You ought to be ashamed of yourself. You're downplaying it. You're pulling back the intensity, and you're not showing them everything that you've done because you don't want to look like a pack of atrocious knuckleheads. You don't want to look like the thugs that I claim you are. You're trying to make yourself look like a bunch of harmless pranksters now that there are eyes on you. I'm talking to you stalkers, undercovers, and liaisons. You know the dangers and the harms you've presented to me over the past 30 years, especially over the past 10 years. And you ought to be ashamed of yourself. You ought to man up and own up to what you're doing. All right, and I'm going to continue calling you packs of zoo animals, and I'm going to continue calling you packs of deleterious and clandestine thugs as well. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to get back to this article. This is an interesting part of it. It says that there's information believed contained in files on 3 other CIA projects known as MK Search, MK Chickwick, and MK Often. That means that MKULTRA has other components to it. So MKULTRA apparently focused on behavior experimentation. There was also an MK Search, an MK Chickwick, and an MK Often. So those are 3 other programs in addition to MKUltra that were run by the CIA as experiments on human beings. And files on all 3 of these programs have been promised to the subcommittee by Turner, who at the time was the director of the CIA. And this man, Admiral Turner, who was the director of the CIA during these experiments, is saying that he thinks that they're abhorrent and that they're horrible. Okay, it'd be nice to see somebody from the Department of Defense or Justice stand up about gang stalking and talk about how horrible it is and how dangerous it is and how deleterious it is and how it has the capacity to make the United States look bad, you see. But apparently the orchestrators of gang stalking and the participants of gang stalking don't care what it makes America look like. Just as long as they get to participate in something where they can conduct themselves in society like violent thugs and get away with it. I guess that's all that's important to them. So there is apparently in MKUltra documents that have not been released as a part of a list of stockpiled exotic pathogens. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this ties into directly into what I have asserted as derived sicknesses or derived bacterial communications that befall targeted individuals. In MKUltra, exotic pathogens were stockpiled. Okay, a pathogen is a bacterial unit. Okay, a pathogen is a bacterial unit. Okay, I'll say it once more. A pathogen is a bacterial unit. And it's saying that the CIA has stockpiled exotic pathogens, meaning that there are exotic or man-made bacteria that the CIA had stockpiled so that it could use these bacteria on people during MKUltra experiments. Okay? I am not kidding you when I say that the U.S. federal establishment in various capacities through various auxiliaries has authorized the spread or the artificial contamination of bacterial units and substances against its populations. Okay, this is a part of gang stalking. It was a part of MKUltra, and it was a part of COINTELPRO. Artificially introducing bacteria to people. Okay, exotic pathogens being stored by the CIA. The CIA has also drawn up a classified list of 86 institutions which were involved in the behavior experiments during MKUltra. One of those, according to a knowledgeable source, is the Smithsonian Institution. What part it played could not be learned. You see, there are thousands of pages of documents available by the CIA on MKUltra. There are a number of odd experiments, and one CIA researchers isolated and collectible sizable amounts of tick venom which can cause muscle paralysis. One agency memo suggested using the insect venom as a knockout agent to resist what the memo writer called involuntary sleep. Okay, that's something that's used in gang stalking. Some kind of invisible powder is being used on people to make them go to sleep around here. It might be tick venom that they're throwing on people. There's a chemical under investigation also called LSE, which produces the effect of a reversible chemical lobotomy. There's a guy by the name of Gottlieb, Senator Gottlieb, described a consultant named Geschiker having supplied misleading information to the IRS, the Internal Revenue Service. Geschiker was paid by MKULTRA, but according to the memo, had to report that he had earned a fee performing consultations with an anonymous person, since the agency contributions had been so designated to the books of the fund. All right, we're going to move on to the next article. Here's an interesting one. It's dated October 6, 1977. It's from the Daily News, the New York Daily News. The article reads, it's by Claire Axelrad and Keith Moore. Reveals secret mind test by CIA at Queens College. Apparently Queens College in New York was one of 80 colleges which the CIA conducted top secret experiments in mind control in between 1953 and 1964. These experiments were in mass conversion designed to study changes of attitude, personality, and behavior. All right, so it shows that, again, that colleges, and we're looking at another college that came forward. Harvard came forward, Massachusetts Institute of Technology came forward, and now Queens College is coming forward saying, yeah, the CIA contacted us about experiments in mind control and the manipulation of people's personalities using a combination of brainwashing techniques and ingestible drugs. Moving on to the next article. Turner appealed to judge in bid to protect sources. This is another Washington Post article dated August 10th, 1979. The article is by Timothy S. Robinson, Washington Post staff writer. And we're going to sum this article up. Turner has appealed to protect his sources. He doesn't want to give the names of certain people that were involved in these experiments. They don't want the CIA to lose its credibility, and they don't want the CIA to lose its ability to recruit civilian informants and participants in experiments in the future. Move on to the next article. The CIA chief admits to mind control tests. It's a reiteration of some things we've talked about, although he has denounced the test as abhorrent. That's one of the Chicago Tribune, August 4th, 1977. Here's another one dated August 4th, 1977. Turner, who is the head of the Admiral Turner, who was the head of the CIA during these tests, is making a pledge This is in the Baltimore Sun, dated August 4th, 1977. Admiral Turner pledges to try to find and assist the victims of the CIA's secret drug experiments. Some of these experiments were carried out at safe houses maintained by the CIA in New York and San Francisco. Move on to the next article. This is the Washington Post, September 2nd, 1977. CIA conducted mind control tests from up to the year 1972. So these tests were conducted from the 1950s to 1972. So that's 22 years of these experiments on U.S. citizens. There was chemical experiments, according to this article, biological experiments under the CIA's code names Project Bluebird and Operation Artichoke. Subjects of the experiment included CIA personnel who were aware of the experiments and foreigners who may not have been aware of the experiments. So there were chemical and biological agents being used on people in these experiments. And these experiments were probably conducted in safe houses. All right, we're going to look at the next article. I'm going to look through this one that I found here. This looks like a letter. Okay, this is dated 19th of February, 1972. It's a Washington Post article. CIA is able to control minds by hypnosis, data shows. All right, so here's an interesting article. It says that the Central Intelligence Agency shook the theory that nice people cannot be made immoral under hypnosis, doing this by getting one woman to act out in a cold-blooded murder in 1951, according to declassified intelligence documents. The Cold War mind control experiment climaxed when the hypnotized woman, described as a peaceful and terrified of guns, fired a pistol point blank at a sleeping colleague, not knowing that the gun had been unloaded. So apparently this very nice woman who was scared of guns picked one up under hypnosis by the CIA and killed another one of the test subjects right there in the room. And it is not difficult under the conclusions of this test study to turn very ethical or very moral women into raging homicidal psychopaths under hypnosis. And that's apparently the long and short of that particular article is you can make a woman who is otherwise timid or ethical become a violent psychopath under hypnosis. Those are the kinds of experiments the CIA was running on people in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, ladies and gentlemen. Here's an interesting one. The Washington Post article dated September 17th of December 1979. It's written by Bill Richards, Washington Post staff writer. Excuse me. Reports suggest CIA involvement in Florida illnesses. So it says here that the CIA conducted open-air tests of whooping cough bacteria in Florida in the mid-1950s, when state medical records show a whooping cough outbreak killed 12 people, according to a Church of Scientology analysis of agency records. The Scientologists said that their examination of about 150 pages of financial records released in recent years by the Central Intelligence Agency indicates that the agency conducted at least one open-air biological test along Florida's Gulf Coast in 1955. Furthermore, this bacteria was spread around by the CIA in Tampa Bay and Sebring, Florida. And when the CIA was spreading this bacteria around voluntarily, again, it's nothing but a terroristic biological attack by the CIA against its own citizens. You understand? This article is conclusive, and it's factual. The CIA in the 1950s, voluntarily and knowingly, as a part of an experiment, spread whooping cough bacteria throughout the state of Florida. Okay? Listen, ladies and gentlemen, if a foreign country were to somehow infiltrate or invade the United States and spread bacteria knowingly among U.S. citizens, that foreign country would be labeled terrorist. What they did would be labeled a biological terrorist attack. And that country would be seen as a war crime. But the CIA did that exact thing. It took whooping cough bacteria and spread it throughout the state of Florida and got several thousand people sick, and at least 12 people died. And that was called a CIA experiment. It wasn't called terrorism, but it is terrorism. They are intentionally inflicting diseases upon the American populace. And what's ironic about it is it was a taxpayer-funded experiment, and taxpayer money was going into the use of government resources, particularly by the CIA, to spread whooping cough throughout the state of Florida. Okay, who says the U.S. federal government has not conducted biologically terroristic experiments against its own citizens? This proves it. Gang stalking is no different. Gang stalkers, undercover operatives, and liaisons knowingly and willingly spread bacteria to targeted test subjects like myself. It's just what the U.S. federal government does, apparently. And this type of activity should spell the end of the CIA. Why does the U.S. taxpayer need an agency that conducts biological terrorism as an experiment against its citizens? At least 12 people died in this experiment. The CIA spread whooping cough throughout the state of Florida in the 1950s. Ladies and gentlemen, an act of domestic terrorism. And the CIA is just still doing stuff like this. We need to get rid of it. The United States of America doesn't need a Central Intelligence Agency that conducts acts of biological terrorism against its citizens for experimental purposes, okay? Okay, state medical records show that the number of whooping cough cases recorded in Florida jumped from 339 and one death in 1954 to 1,080 cases and 12 deaths in 1955. So just in 1 year, 750 new cases of whooping cough and 11 new deaths caused by the CIA, just simply to monitor what the effect of spreading this whooping cough bacteria throughout Florida, what the effects of it would be. All right, and this is a part of MKUltra. Part of MKUltra was spreading diseases, ladies and gentlemen, to see how people's bodies and societies and communities would react to massive sicknesses. All right, here's another article from, looks like it's kind of covered up. It looks like the New York Times. Dated August 16th, 1977. And this article was written by Joe Thomas, special to the New York Times. And the title of this article is "Knockout Drug Hunt by CIA is Described." And the subtitle says, "Records tell of proposed tests on hospitalized persons in a 6-year project costing $531,960. This knockout drug was used on unwitting hospital patients. And this project was designed to discover the biochemical mechanisms that cause delirium to develop, and to develop new drugs and techniques to produce maximum levels of physical and emotional stress in human beings." So this is a part of MKUltra, and definitely one of the most bizarre parts of MKUltra. They are using, people who are terminally ill as test subjects for drugs that are engineered to cause maximum levels of emotional distress. And physical stress. So, in other words, the CIA was working on weapons, we'll call them medical weapons, that are designed to cause emotional stress in people. And they were using terminally ill patients in hospitals as the test subjects for these drugs that were made to maximize emotional stress. Um, 2-3. The extent of university work for the CIA is hard to pin down. This particular article was by the New York Times, dated Sunday, October 9th, 1977. It was written by Joe Thomas. Essentially, this article is just talking about the various institutions that participated in MKUltra. It was colleges, it was universities, it was prisons, it was hospitals, it was safe houses. There were a lot of different locations that the CIA used to administer the brainwashing and other techniques that MKUltra presented. And this person, who worked at Massachusetts Institution of Technology, said that he feels that his career and his personal life were injured by the CIA, who in 1957 received a $12,000 grant from the Society of Investigation of Human Ecology. At that time, Dr. Weiner was a guest at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. And he's essentially saying that what the CIA did using him as a researcher for MKUltra and using MIT as one of its testing grounds. He believes that the CIA, through MKUltra, injured his research program. And he expressed deep regret and remorse at having participated. And a director of government relations at Stanford University said he believes he's been made into a guinea pig by this operation. And mind you, the kinds of experiments that were run on people by MKUltra left some of them dead, and left some people were left paralyzed, some people were left sick, some people were left with brain damage, some people were left psychologically incapacitated. The kinds of experiments that were run by the CIA on the American people during this time period, 1953 to 1973, it caused all kinds of horrible damage to their personal and professional lives. And it also caused damage to the image of the CIA because it was investigated for its human experimentation on people. And when gang stalking was put together, the orchestrators of gang stalking said, we're not gonna make the same mistakes that the people who ran MKUltra made. We're not gonna make the same mistakes that the people who ran COINTELPRO made. We're not gonna make those mistakes. When we implement gang stalking and use human test subjects for this, we're going to make sure that the Senate keeps their mouth shut. We're going to make sure colleges and universities keep their mouth shut. We're going to make sure the news media keeps their mouth shut. We're going to make sure the American people keep their mouth shut. And we're also going to stigmatize the people who come forward about it. And we're going to find renowned psychologists and sociologists to label these people as crazy, so that we won't run into the same legal problems with gang stalking as our predecessors ran into with MKUltra and COINTELPRO, with all the Senate investigations and the apologies and people coming forward with their testimonies, and the CIA's image taking a hit, the FBI's image taking a hit, allegations of human experimentation and congressional investigations, and people being held accountable, and the program having to shut down in shame. Okay, all of these things happened to COINTELPRO and MKUltra. None of these things have happened so far to gang stalking, and that's by design. Okay, the orchestrators of COINTELPRO and MKUltra, their work found its way into the hands of other deleterious actors in the Departments of Defense and Justice, who said, we're going to do something similar to COINTELPRO. We're going to do something similar to MKUltra. We're going to merge them together and do human experimentation in the form of clandestine gang stalking, but we're going to learn from their mistakes. And this time around, there'll be no Senate investigations. There'll be no congressional investigations. There'll be no newspaper articles about it. There'll be no lawsuits. Okay, there'll be no consumer advocates coming forward. Okay, there'll be no university presidents going to the media talking about how messed up the program is. There'll be none of that, because we will coerce people to deny its existence, and we'll make it fun for people. We'll make it signal-based. We'll make it so that only certain kinds of American citizens are targeted, and we'll make it so that if anyone comes forward about it, they'll be labeled as crazy or psychotic or defective. You see. So we're going to move on to the next article. We're in the final three here. It's essentially talking about, so this is a Radio TV Reports Incorporated document. It's for the public affairs staff. The program is Jack Anderson Confidential, which was apparently a television show that ran on the station WJLA-TV. This communication is dated February 12, 1983. It appears to be the transcript for a television show aired in Washington, D.C. on Project MKUltra. And Jack Anderson, the host of this television show, begins 2 decades ago. The CIA carried out secret experiments on thousands of U.S. citizens. The purpose was to discover ways of controlling human behavior. The super secret program used unwitting victims as living test tubes for bizarre mind-altering drugs. The CIA called the project MKULTRA. Now, for the first time, some of the victims have stepped forward. They're former inmates of Atlanta Federal Penitentiary, where they were given LSD and other drugs as part of the MKUltra program. Now they're suing the CIA for lying to them about the true purpose of the experiments, also for the mental damage that they say they suffered from drug sessions. So apparently, this particular article was aimed at some of the inmates in prisons that were subject to MKUltra and the brain damage that they suffered as a part of its various drug experiments. And there was a lawsuit being brought against the CIA for subjecting them to these drugs while they were incarcerated. So you see another lawsuit. Okay, you're seeing lawsuits, you're seeing congressional hearings, you're seeing Senate investigations, you're seeing news media attention, you're seeing consumer advocate investigations, you're seeing people are coming forward and going on talk shows about it. This program got a lot of bad press during and after it ended, and it caused the CIA and the orchestrators of the project a lot of grief, and it brought the U.S. federal government some embarrassment that its CIA was doing stuff like this to people, unwitting American citizens. The orchestrators of gang stalking want to avoid lawsuits, avoid media attention, avoid congressional testimony, avoid Senate hearings, avoid newspaper clippings, avoid television interviews, avoiding lawsuits and all of these things, avoiding all these things. You see, they don't want gang stalking to get exposed the way MKUltra got exposed, the way COINTELPRO got exposed. So they've taken precautions. The national security and the intelligence apparatus in this country, they've taken precautions to make sure that these things don't happen. And there's a reason why gang stalking is not a mainstream topic. It's because it's embarrassing to the United States of America. So we're going to go into the next article. This is from the Ed Bradley Show. This is a transcript of the Ed Bradley Show. It's from Radio TV Reports, Inc. to Public Affairs staff. The program is 60 minutes. It aired on WDVM-TV, a CBS network affiliate. This is from the December 23rd, 1984 episode, which aired at 7 o'clock p.m. And the subject was MKUltra / mind control experiments. Essentially, this is basically the Ed Bradley Show. Not the Ed Bradley Show, but 60 minutes, in which Ed Bradley was one of the presenters. It's essentially a television program. We all know what 60 Minutes is, where they investigate sociological phenomena. On this particular episode, some people who were the subject of COINTELPRO came forward about the effect that this program had on them. This program took place in prisons, hospitals, universities, workplaces, and safe houses all across the country. And this particular project that they're talking about on this particular interview took place in Canada. So apparently MKUltra was conducted in Canada as well, under the code name Subproject Number 68. Dr. Ewan Cameron, Zal Orico, Robert Logie, Mary Moreau, Dr. Elliot Emmanuel, and Dr. Harvey Weinstein. Okay, Joseph Rao. There were a lot of people that came forward about this program, the effects that it had on them, and the effects that they observed that it had on some of their patients. A lot of the people that came forward about this and were on this program had difficulty remembering everything that happened because of the various mind control agents that were used on them. And this woman, Mary Merrow, saying that she saw electroshock therapy being used on a number of the patients. And it's just basically talking about some of the atrocious things that were done to these people and how it shaved years off of their life. These experiments were shaving years off of their life, and that their life expectancy had gone down because of what happened to them in this Project MKUltra experiment. This is the last article. We'll look at this and close the lecture. This was a declassified article. It's from the Washington Post. It's dated August 28th, 1982. It's written by Jack Anderson. Lawsuit forces CIA confession on MKUltra. More than 6 years ago, I first exposed the horror of MKUltra, the CIA super secret program that used unwitting victims as living test tubes for bizarre, mind-altering drugs. The nightmare still isn't over for some of the tortured guinea pigs. Bits and pieces of the story have come out over the years in various forums, but now for the first time the CIA has been forced to acknowledge in a judicial proceeding the terrifying scope of its experiments. The CIA confessions were extracted in writing by Atlanta attorney Thomas E. Maddox Jr., who represents 4 of the prisoners who were experimented on in the Atlanta Federal Penitentiary in the 1950s and 60s. The victims in their 50s are seeking $500,000 apiece in damages from the government. One of the plaintiffs, Pharrell V. Kirk, was used as a chemical mixing bowl, even though the CIA knew he was mentally unstable. After being dosed with a variety of drugs, Kirk attempted suicide by burning himself alive and hanging himself, and once tried to chew his own arm off. A second victim, Don Roderick Scott, says he suffered permanent brain damage from the test. A third, John R. Mayol, is a fugitive, and the fourth, James T. Knight, is still in prison. All 4 say they suffered flashbacks and other severe symptoms for years after they were drugged by the CIA. Here are some of the shocking admissions made by the Justice Department on behalf of the CIA under questioning by the victims' attorneys. MKUltra's purpose was research and development of chemical, biological, and radiological materials in a clandestine operation to control human behavior. The CIA hoped psychoactive chemicals would work on victims' minds and emotions to release them from the restraint of self-control. This program was also intended to develop an anti-interrogation drug to counter Soviet truth serums, or possibly to scramble a CIA agent's brain so that any confession to his captors would be useless. MKUltra and its successor, program MK Search, were terminated in part because of the drugs and techniques being too unpredictable in the effect of human beings. Nevertheless, the CIA pursued another chemical program, MK Burn, until at least 1970. One of its researchers, Dr. Carl Pfeiffer, who worked on MKUltra, Pfeiffer has sworn he was merely trying to find a cure for mental illness. That is what Atlanta convicts were told. The materials developed and tested were hallucinogenic or would otherwise affect the central nervous system of humans. The substances included LSD, mescaline, a truth serum, and powerful amphetamines. The CIA can produce no written consent forms and admits no follow-ups were made of the guinea pigs. Normally, there weren't even doctors on hand that might, after the convicts were drugged, to evaluate their health. Some prisoners were so hopped up that they had to be given more drugs to attain sleep. 2 victims were transferred to a medical facility because of apparent mental problems. But CIA denies that this was because of an adverse reaction to its drugs, which were intended to duplicate psychosis. Though expense records were kept meticulously, $350,000 for the Atlanta sub-project, the overall records were ordered destroyed in 1973 by Dr. Sidney Gottlieb, a top CIA scientist. Pfeiffer destroyed the records in 1972. And as a footnote, the CIA refused comment. Gottlieb told my associate Les Whitten the Atlanta project was in keeping with the kind of experiments being done at that time. Pfeiffer doesn't ordinarily take calls, according to a voice at his New Jersey office. Okay, so that's the last article, ladies and gentlemen, and that's going to conclude the lecture. Ultimately, ladies and gentlemen, what you'll notice is that when it comes right down to it, yes, the U.S. federal government did conduct mind experiments on people, knowing that some of the mind experiments could cause health defects up to and including death. Ultimately, ladies and gentlemen, these documents, these reports, these newspaper clippings, all of them, ladies and gentlemen, are valuable to understanding mind control and to understanding gang stalking, which is obviously a continuation of Project MKUltra. Thank you for tuning in.